Right. So hopefully everybody is getting in okay. Today we have Jimmy Holdgrafer from Theodore Roosevelt National Park. My name is Rebecca Pierce, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at the Bison Center. I'm not going to give too much of an intro here because Jimmy has an excellent presentation prepared for us today. If you guys have questions, those of you that are joining us here today, if you have questions and you don't want to wait till the end, just pop them in the chat and we'll have them all there, and then we can run through them when Jimmy is all done with his presentation. So without further ado, take it away.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. Like you said, my name is Jimmy Holdgrafer. I'm the wildlife biologist here at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Been working here for about a little over 4 years now, and today we're going to be talking about management of our herd here. And without further ado, I will get into it. So I thought I'd just start with a brief little overview of history of the herd here. So as we all know, bison were really extirpated from the region. And when the park was established in 1947, fencing projects began to reintroduce bison to the area. The south unit and north unit of our park all have a 10-foot tall woven wire fence that was installed to reintroduce the animals here. Once that was completed in 1956, we got 29 bison from Fort Niobrara out in Kansas, and that was the beginning of the herd in the south unit. And then in 1962, we brought 20 bison from our south unit to the north unit of our park. So a lot of this presentation is going to be focusing on management, but I thought I would talk a little bit about research we've done in the past year to help better inform our management practices. Some of these projects have included forage allocation studies that were done in the 90s, looking at forage production and competition between the herbivores we have out here, specifically bison, horses, elk, and mule deer. We use that to inform our population objectives here. Up in the north unit, we try to manage between 100 to 250 bison, and down in the south unit, that ranges from 300 to 500 animals. We've also done some work looking at the genetics of our herd. As some people might be familiar, most bison across the country are in smaller, more isolated populations, and there's not a lot of gene flow going between them. So to help inform the metapopulation strategy that the Department of the Interior is shifting to, we sent in genetic samples to be part of the larger population viability analysis that's looked at basically what the genetic composition of herds managed by the Department of the Interior, so National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, what that looked like, and trying to better inform how we can shift animals between herds to help increase genetic diversity in these isolated populations. So a lot of that work happened in, I think that was 2017, like 2016, submitting samples, and that analysis was completed, I believe, in 2020. And now we are starting to implement some of those movements to increase genetic diversity in the herd. We are currently also working on another study looking at the genetic relationship of animals as they come through our handling facilities during roundups to help better inform our culling strategies while we're removing animals, to get a better idea of how we can improve our best practices to retain genetic diversity while we were doing those population reductions with our roundups. So we are currently trying to get work done on that this winter here, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the preliminary results are from that and potentially expanding it to data sets with herds at different parks and across the country, and seeing if there's trends in that we can use to better improve our culling techniques that we're implementing. So kind of talked about shifting animals in between herds. Another research project that was done here in 2017, we introduced some bison from Badlands National Park up into the North Unit, and we were doing a collaring project to learn more about the spatial use of animals in the North and South Unit, and we took that opportunity to also put some collars on those introduced animals to evaluate how well do animals that are introduced from external herds into recipient herds, how well do they integrate, to try to get a better idea of when you're introducing animals, how effective is the like percolation of their genetics and interactions with the existing herd. So the manuscript for that is still being written up and results are pending, but we did find some interesting results that suggested that the older animals that we had introduced, they did tend to stay closer in relation to each other than other animals in the existing herd. So that is something we're hoping to use to inform future management decisions when moving animals, such as potentially bringing in younger animals when doing introductions, because they might be more likely to readily integrate into the herds. We've also looked at spatial use of bison here in the North and South units, just using GPS collars. That was done in 2017 and 18, just trying to get a better idea of where exactly are the bison selecting for in the park, and really what are their ranges, what areas are they using the most. And to build on that, early last year, we put out some different collars in our South unit that we're collecting some really interesting data, not only spatial data, which is what most collars are really collecting data on, but the collars we put out last year were also equipped with accelerometers that could really tell you a lot of information about what that animal is doing. So not only where is it, but is it just moving from one spot to another? Is it grazing? Is it resting and ruminating? And using this information, we're hoping to get a better idea of not just what areas the bison like to use and inhabit, but really what features of the landscape are they selecting for different behaviors as well too. And that was part of a larger study collaborating with USGS that put those same collars on bison in different ecosystems across the country. So there were some collars deployed here at Great Sand Dunes National Park, and also down at Grand Canyon National Park. So trying to get an idea of not only what animals are doing in like Great Plains ecosystem, but also what they're doing in different ecosystems as well, and how are they selecting their habitats differently. So moving on from that, we use a lot of this research to help inform a lot of the management that we do here. And so what does that mean, and what does that look like here at our park? So that kind of falls into three larger buckets. So population management is one of the largest components here for us. Because out here at our park, there really are not any predators to manage population sizes. We do have mountain lions out here in the Badlands, but we don't have grizzly bears or wolves like we historically have. So without any type of intervention, populations will just continue to grow. So in order to mitigate and solve that, we will do biannual bison roundups, alternating between the North and South unit. each year, and we will do removals based off the population size and demographic composition of the herd. And we ship out our excess bison to primarily tribal nations that are building their herds. Sometimes they'll be sent to a nonprofit or a zoo, but that is our main tool for managing the population size here, is doing roundups, and we'll get into that a little bit more. We also are trying to increase genetics, our genetic diversity here. So trying to mitigate mitigating genetic drift over time by introducing animals from external herds. And another management action that we need to do is trying to keep bison within our park boundaries. And we'll dive into each one of these a little bit more with the following slides. So roundups, what do they look like? So here's some pictures kind of illustrating the workflow of conducting one of these. So before we really even get to this point, I'm looking at the data we collected at the roundup 2 years prior, and looking at the sex and age demographics, projecting what our population growth should be, and what the sex and age demographics are anticipated to be that fall. And using that information, we'll estimate just how many animals we'll need to be removing and of what demographics. We'll be getting our data ready and getting our facilities physically ready. We'll be contacting staff and making proper arrangements for making sure we have enough people at our handling facilities, the right people, like having a veterinarian on staff, and making arrangements with our helicopter pilot. So once everything is all aligned and ready to go, during the weekend, we will go up in the helicopter, be myself or another member of our resource management group here, and we will go with the pilot and start to gather animals, pushing them to our handling facility. So we go and find mostly cow and calf groups and start basically bunching them together and pushing the larger herd to the facility itself. You can kind of get an idea of what that looks like in that top left picture there, where you can just get a big, it looks like a bunch of ants going to a hill from up in the air. And so that picture is in our south unit, and you can see that rim on the horizon is where we're pushing them towards. Basically, the bison they respond to pressure applied by the presence of the helicopter and move in the opposite direction, and you can use that to push them across pretty large rugged landscapes compared to what you could do on foot. And so once we're up on that rim in the background of that top left picture, we have a wing fence that leads to our handling facility, which you can see in that top middle picture. So we push the animals along that wing fence that leads them into our catch pasture that you can see in that top right corner. There we'll hold them until we've gathered most of the herd, and then we will use heavy equipment equipped with push walls to start herding them into the handling facility itself. So our handling facility is essentially a series of progressively smaller compartments. It starts with a large catch pen, or yeah, we'll call it a crowding tub, and we can adjust the size of that, and then we will use flags to work them into alleys that will lead to the squeeze chute that you can see depicted in the bottom left corner. For those of you that aren't familiar with squeeze chutes, it's basically a machine that will hold the animal, restricting its movement while we can collect samples, scan its ear. We implant microchips in each individual that we handle so we can keep track of them throughout roundups over the years. During that time, I'll age and sex it. We'll collect hair samples for genetic analysis. We'll draw blood for testing for disease, or also doing nasal swabs. But this is where we're really collecting data and information on the animal. And based off its sex and age, I'll determine whether we're going to keep it or if we're going to ship it off to one of our recipients. So in that bottom middle corner or bottom middle picture, you can see a hair card. And in the bottom right corner, you can see the bison while they're being held before we load them onto trailers and ship them off. So really the primary objective of this operation is for reducing population size to get it within our objectives. I mentioned the population sizes that we're trying to manage for a little earlier. So I usually will try to get the population down to the lower threshold of what we're trying to manage for. So over the next 2 years, in between when we're going to be handling them next, they'll be back up to that upper threshold. So moving on, another component of management here is genetic gene flow management. So kind of touched on it earlier, but there are 19 different conservation herds managed by the Department of the Interior, whether that be National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, or Bureau of Land Management. And so we're really trying to, I have developed a what's called the bison metapopulation strategy. So we've been inventorying the genetics of our different herds and looking at what populations make the most sense to translocate animals from one to the other to increase the genetic diversity across all the different herds. So last year we brought in some bison from Wind Cave to our south unit that are depicted here. We brought in 3 yearling cows, hoping that the younger animals will be more likely to integrate into our herd than other older animals. Might take more time to do so. But this is really just another component of trying to just manage healthy bison populations and trying to mitigate the negative effects of closed off populations. And so another challenge that comes with having bison is keeping them within park boundaries. So bison love to roam. They don't really like to just stay in one spot. They'll move all across our park, and they will they will also like find holes in the fence as well too. For those that haven't been out to the Badlands out here, it's a really unique, interesting landscape that's really characterized by a lot of the claystone here, but it's very susceptible to erosion. So with that, there's maintaining all of our boundary fence can be a challenge, as there's constantly holes being eroded in the landscape, creating exit points. We also have issues fencing across the river that runs through our north and south unit. And so this can create opportunities for bison to get out. Predominantly bulls are usually the ones that are usually dispersing, trying to look, it's just in their nature to look for new ranges and looking for mating opportunities. So they're much more likely to disperse than females. So these are usually the animals that we'll get calls about. So bison, we manage them as wildlife here within the park boundaries, but once they leave our perimeter, they are considered trespass livestock. So they are considered the park's property and responsibility to manage and keep from getting onto other people's land. So we will get calls from people of, hey, I have a bison out, there's a bison here. Can you guys come get it or do something about it? And so we kind of have to manage these on a case-by-case basis as far as whether it's feasible for us to return the animal into the park or if we need to destroy it. And so oftentimes, rarely is it really cows getting out. A lot of times if they do get out, we find them right on the fence boundary, and we're able to get them back in by cutting some hole in the fence and just using low stress handling techniques to try to push them to that hole in the fence. Something else we consider when we are deciding whether to bring animals back in or not is how long they've been out. If they've been out and intermingling with cattle or other species, there is potential for bringing disease back into the park. So that is another thing we consider. Also, distance from the park boundary is another consideration. So it's not uncommon for bulls to wander several miles, and we really don't have a good way to effectively push them back to the park. So when we can't bring them back or don't think it's a good idea to bring the animals back to the park, we will destroy them. And during that time, we are equipped to recover and salvage the meat from them, and we will donate the meat that we're able to recover to local tribes or to other partner groups that we have here. So that's about all I have. Does anybody have any questions so far?
So thank you so much. That was really informative. I'm echoing for some reason. So there's a ton of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to, oops, where did they go here? I'm just going to start with the first one here, which was from Cheryl. Do you work with zoos also for genetics or just other federal facilities?
Right now, for as far as really with other federal herds right now, for the meta population, those are like, to my knowledge, the source herds that have been integrated into like the data set that's being looked at and evaluated. I know we have donated bison to zoos in the past, but as far as looking for source genetics right now, I believe we are primarily focusing on bringing in animals from other Department of Interior herds.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I realized that the second part of that was, do you work with other state facilities like Custer State Park? So,
not to my knowledge, no.
Cheryl also wanted to know, do bison react differently to helicopter roundups than wild horses do? Is there loss from fatigue or trampling, as can sometimes occur with horses? And have any other roundup techniques been tried?
Yeah, so I'd say the bison, so we always have myself or another resource management staff up on board, like with the pilot while they're up, especially when they're getting started, to look at the behavior of the animals, and doing multiple things. So we are advising the pilot on just what is the most efficient and safest route to the handling facility, because we have a lot of really breaky, steep terrain here. And so we're advising on that. We're also monitoring the animals as well, too, looking for signs of stress, heat fatigue, like if their tongues are out, if they are starting to roll and wallow, like they are trying to cool down. but we really, the pilots that we bring in, they are specialized in doing this type of work. It's not, you don't just call just anybody up to come do this. There's certain certifications and standards that these pilots need to have experience with and have those credentials. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again? So it's kind of like for the behavior part.
Yeah, so I'll read the whole question. Do bison react differently to helicopter roundups than wild horses do? Is there loss from fatigue or trampling? And have any other roundup techniques been tried?
Right. Okay. And I'd say the bison, horses, I would say they move faster. The bison are usually moving slower compared to horses. And we have tried other methods in the past that are ground based, like using horseback riders. But it has led to more human injuries, like when we are putting people on the ground, like specifically with riding. There was numerous incidents of people breaking their legs, like falling off, hurting themselves. So it's safer. It is also more time efficient with a helicopter than on the ground, and it is also really useful to be able to get an idea of where everybody is very quickly with the helicopter, which you can't really do on the ground. They're scattered all over the landscape here. So we're also able to get population censuses too, of which animals we weren't able to bring in. Like the cows, the cow groups are much more responsive to the helicopter than say older bulls that are more isolated. So a lot of times we don't get a lot of older bulls in, and with the helicopter we can go and count which ones we did not get in as well too. That can be used to help inform our population estimations in the future years for our next roundup. As far as injuries, for trampling, no. I mean, I kind of just got to speak off like my experience here, but I haven't seen any injuries directly related like to using the helicopter to push the animals to the facility, like since I've been here.
Awesome, thank you. I have a few questions for you as well, and so obviously anybody listening, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Because we do have a fair amount of time left where we can tackle some of those. And so my questions are kind of more high-level questions that you may have tackled, bits and pieces of as you've been going through your presentation already. So feel free to say, move it along or whatever as you need to. But so my first question for you is, a lot of people think of our national parks as places where nature is really left alone. Your presentation and, this conversation has shown us that that's not necessarily the case. So how do you explain the role of active management, whether it's those roundups, population objectives, genetic introductions, to folks who expect our parks to simply let nature take its course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess my answer to that would be is we try to have we try to minimize the amount of intervention as needed, but it's really like our responsibility as resource managers to address issues that are kind of created from human causes, like the removal of predators from the landscape out here. If we didn't need to, if the populations were regulating themselves, then we wouldn't just be going out and catching bison for no reason. But for intervening with the population growth, there's just a limited amount of groceries out there for them, and population growth is exponential. So if we did not do anything to manage the population size, it would just continue to grow and grow and grow unchecked. And then we would have a bunch of starving animals out there. And something for like the genetic, like the gene flow between different populations. Like in the past, if we had no fences on our landscape and bison could roam freely and we could have them living like deer, where they can just naturally migrate, then we wouldn't need to do that. But if we don't actively intervene, then we will have genetic degradation through genetic drift over time. And so really, like the National Park Service has more of a like preservation ethos, and it's really like only intervene like when needed, like when it won't naturally work itself out, like the introduction of invasive plants and stuff like that. Like those aren't just going to naturally go away by themselves, and they cause deleterious effects to the ecosystem. So that's how I would address that. Is really just intervention as necessary.
Great. And so, that dovetails nicely into my second question for you. And I do see that Cheryl popped another one in the chat as well. So we'll tackle that one in a second. But, as interest in restoring bison continues to grow, where do you see the greatest role for private landowners and for ranchers?
I mean, I would say one of the biggest ways that like private ranches and landowners can contribute is just like having more bison on the landscape, is preserving, helping just bolster the overall population of the animals that exist, which is also helping bank genetics after they have gone through like severe bottleneck events. So the more animals we have out there, like the better reservoirs to tap into, for just genetic health of the species in general. And as far as like beyond that, I feel like ecosystem effects kind of just depends on like the scale of the landscape that the animals can live on, and the density that they're managed at. But I think really the biggest thing would be just the more animals we have, the more robust the genetics, like the genetic health of the animals are, especially with not critical, what's the right word? Just like intentional, like genetic management over time too, and doing introductions between isolated populations like we have can help mitigate the genetic drift and loss of alleles and genetic information.
Great, thank you. So Cheryl's question was, are the bison easily seen by park visitors, or do they stay hidden in more remote areas?
Man, it's funny. Like it's either you're in them or you're not. It's kind of, the reason I'm kind of chuckling to myself is our population was like I think it was like 720 in the South Unit a couple years ago, and it was like the highest it had ever been, and yet we would still have visitors come in and be like, I didn't see any bison. I'm like, what the heck? So it's like it's really hit or miss. It's like you especially like with the cow-calf groups, it's either you're in them or you're not. But there's a lot of viewing opportunities in our park. So sorry to just kind of chuckle. It's either people see tons of them or they just see none of them. But I think more often than not, there's plenty of viewing opportunities here in our park.
Well, and if they're there, they've got to be hard to miss. So, I mean, they're not small.
Right. Yeah, especially if you bring binoculars out here and are just like looking around. Sometimes they might not be like right by the road, but you just go out hiking, especially like up on top of the buttes or in like the valley bottoms. That's usually where they're hanging out. So if you can't see one right up close, usually if you're looking with binoculars, you can find some.
Awesome. So that leads really well into Kevin's question, which was approximately how many bulls, cows, and calves are there, and do you try to maintain a certain bull to cow ratio?
Yeah, so we, I don't know if I can break down all the demographics off the top of my head, but we do try to manage for an even sex ratio to the best that we can. So I would say, I mean, you kind of just got to split the numbers 50-50. So I think, what is it, up in the North Unit, we should have around 300 animals this year. And then down here in the South Unit, I believe it's right around 400, including like recruitment from this year. So I couldn't break down all the demographics off the top of my head of those ratios, but those that are like the overall population size is just about right now.
So we've talked a lot about, and again, if anybody has follow-up questions, feel free to plug them in, but I know we've talked a lot about the past, we've talked a lot about the present, so I have a couple questions that are geared more towards the future. So the first one is how, if it has, how has technology changed bison management over the last decade or so? And what kinds of innovations are you personally most excited about?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind as far as how technology changed. I think it's like changed our methods for how we can look at genetics, and how quickly we can share information, and how fast we can react as managers, and especially with this larger effort that's been in the works for I think like a decade plus, like the meta population strategy. I think that's something I'm super excited for, is just being able to have better information about what you're bringing in, and really like what your options are, as far as like bringing in animals from different places, and having places that are also just willing and on board to participate. Some other stuff that comes to mind is like the GPS collars that I was talking about that we deployed last year. They're off the animals now. But I think we're going to be able to learn a lot more about not just where the animals are, but really like what they're doing. And I think that is going to play into, instead of just looking at forage production to kind of base our populations based off what is like the most amount of animals that we can have on the landscape. Really understanding what areas are they using more than others, and like what are they doing there, because it's not like they're using the landscape evenly. And so using that information that we're getting from that data to better inform the numbers that we have, to not just maximize the amount of animals, but also like maximize the amount of, I guess, ecosystem benefits and overall landscape health comes to mind too. So those are a couple of things that come to mind as far as like how technology and its improvements are going to be improving our knowledge of how we should be managing bison on the landscape.
So kind of tying into this, the collaring system and using that to learn more about how the bison are behaving and what they're doing and where. What kinds of unanswered, if any, what unanswered research questions about bison do you think are most interesting or deserve the most attention next?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna kind of repeat myself, but I think like that question of just exactly like the impacts they're having, and how to integrate that into our population, like management sizes as well too, instead of just looking at it more so as how many can we have. And yeah, I don't know, that's the biggest thing that comes to mind for me.
No, that's a big thing. That's great. Kevin has a question in the chat, which was, did you mention if there is a max population size that can be sustained?
So, well, it just really varies on environmental variables. Like this year, we're in like a bad drought. So it's like what is like the max? Like what is the max where we could sustain bison, but are we having a bad effect on the plant communities by them grazing everything down? Is going to be a different answer than what is a sustainable population size for all weather conditions, because you don't want to just manage your population based off like your best years. That's why we usually manage kind of towards like not the lowest threshold, but a lower threshold for situations in environmental conditions like we're experiencing right now, where we're not having as much like plant production. And what if that happens for multiple years in a row? So we're not always trying to like ride that max line, you know what I mean? Because that could put the animals in a bad spot, and then we can only be so reactive as far as for removing animals from the landscape to like if we don't have enough food here for them, then we'd have to bring them somewhere. We'd have to try to bring them somewhere else like that. Or if we have an insane, huge wildfire that removes a ton of forage for them. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
Well, you got a thumbs up, so I think it did.
If I stop talking, I get it.
No, I think that was great. I will give like 30 seconds in case anybody has any other questions that they want to pop in the chat before we wrap up here, because I always hate cutting anybody off. But if people, so Cheryl said this was very interesting and informative. Thank you for this presentation and your answers to our questions. If people have any follow-up questions after the presentation, and we will be putting this on our website as well, so people can go back and listen to it later. So if folks have other questions, is there a way for them to get a hold of you or best contact method?
Yeah, I could put my email in the chat. I guess sorry guys, I'm new to Google here, but I'll just throw my email in the chat. If anybody has any questions, I'll be a stranger.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jimmy, so much for joining us today. I personally learned a ton, and it sounds like our participants here did too. So we really appreciate it, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for hosting this and putting it on. I'm always happy to just talk bison with people, and thank you guys for tuning in.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.